Hi, this is LaRosha Royer from Tyler, Texas, and you're listening to the Next 15 podcast show with Trey North on Spreaker.com.
You're listening to The Next 15, a 15-minute podcast show for the binge listener, covering random topics such as relationships, current news, and everyday life issues. My name is Trey North, and for the next 15 minutes, I hope to make you laugh, educate, and inspire you. Welcome to the Next 15 podcast show on this Friday at 7 p.m. You know what time it is. It's another episode of the Next 15, and we're picking it up from last week. We talked about enough. That was the topic. I'm here with my co-host, Chris McAllister.
Yo, what's going on, everybody?
Life Changers Church pastor in the great city of Austin, Texas. How's it going?
It's going good, man. It's always good to be back in the saddle, guys. How are you guys doing out there?
And we're not alone tonight. We have some guest co-hosts that you might have heard on the first part of Enough. We have two great Black African American individuals.
Yeah.
We have one in studio and one via phone call. My first guest is. She's a client experience manager and minister and member of LCC right here in Austin. Her name is Tiffany Pascal. How are you doing?
Hey, everybody. I'm doing really, really good. It's good to be with you tonight.
And then I have, you guys know him from the commercials, Bald, Bearded, and Blessed. He's a husband and a father of two. He's also outside of, he lives in Humble, Texas, right outside of Houston, and he's a loyal supporter of the Next 15. We have Rod Garrett right with us via telephone call. Hey, Rod, how's it going, man?
It's going great. Glad to be here. Glad to be here with everybody.
You guys know what it is. We're talking about the murder of a black man, George Floyd.
Yep.
Was murdered on Memorial Day of last week after being pinned down by a Caucasian Minneapolis police officer, which sparked the outrage, not just there, but worldwide at this point.
Yes,
I believe even global in
Yep.
some areas, which now all four officers are facing charges with Derek Chauvin. He was the 19-year veteran.
Yeah.
The supervisor actually was charged with and is being held, I think, on a $1 million. I don't know if he got out of jail, but or it was on a $1 million bail. He faces second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and a second-degree manslaughter charges, and is scheduled to make his first appearance on Monday in court.
Wow.
The other three, Thomas Lane, Toe Tao, and J. Alexander Kung, were charged with aiding and abetting second-degree murder and aiding and abetting, manslaughter. Wow. What do y'all think about that?
Yeah. That's good. About time. It was, to me, it was a little bit of a problem that it took so long to arrest these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's nor here or there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Hey, hold up. Before we go into it, I just want to say hello to our listeners. Forgive me for not saying thank you for tuning in tonight. My apologies. Thank you so much. And for those who are listening on Spreaker.com, thank you so very much. You can also catch us at next15podcast.com. But we'd love to hear your feedback in the chat room tonight. And again, it is Enough Part 2. I don't know even where to start with this. I don't.
A lot to talk about.
One thing interesting about it was that I saw that his wife, Derek Chauvin's wife, has filed for divorce.
Wow.
And and claims to be devastated by the death of George Floyd. Wow.
I mean, you know what? That's a good place to start. I mean, we have a young lady here. Like, would you divorce her? Like, if this happened, I don't know how long they were married, but with this type of situation, I mean, is this a good case for divorce?
Yes.
Oh, well, there you
I
go.
wanted
Have a great day, guys.
Yeah,
Next
I
15.
wanted to say something really deep, but just the answer is yes. I think so. When it's a situation like this and just a blatant crime was committed, like I can't stand by that.
Yeah.
I can't stand by it.
Do you think I'm just going to switch? I'm always the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and who's to say she's not? I'm not her.
Right.
Do you think maybe it's a smart move on her part?
Well, yeah, I think
yeah.
I think it was twofold. Probably one, her personal conviction wouldn't allow her to stay, but number two, probably she thought of her safety. Would you guys agree?
I will agree with
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
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 Yep. Well, let's get right to it. Do y'all believe that these acts should be qualified as a hate crime?
Yes. Unequivocally, yes. And the reason why I say that so emphatically is if you look at the perpetrator of Mr. Floyd's murder, he has a history. He has a documented history of complaints. And also too, he worked, if it's reported that he actually worked at the same nightclub with Mr. George.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, so there are some intricate details here that I think are very noteworthy. But to answer your question just straight up, yes, I think of this nature, it qualifies without a doubt.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you, Rod, there. Like, at this point, especially with the information that has come out with, like, again, this officer knew George. Like, this wasn't a random individual.
Wow.
Like, he knew George Floyd and still treated him in a manner that's unacceptable. You know what I mean?
Yes.
This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't just a random African-American male. This was an African-American male that he knew and still gave that type of, action towards. So I'm so 100% with you. Like, absolutely, yes.
You know what baffles me is I also read that a few of the officers were asking for a different position of his arrest. And I read that they were saying, hey, we asked, our supervisor, maybe should we stand him up or should we turn him over? And his response was negative to that. You know what I mean? And so their attorneys arguing, hey, they were just following what their supervisor told them to do. But at some point, you have to be a human.
Right.
There's some morality that has to step in regardless of my supervisor. If my supervisor told me to jump off the bridge, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, precisely. Put yourself in a position if you're laying on the ground and you can't breathe, and would you want to have to wait for somebody to get their supervisor's approval to get off of you? No, you would not. You would not. So that's senseless to me.
Right. I do like that example that you just gave. Like, if my supervisor told me to jump off a cliff, am I gonna jump just because that's what he said?
Exactly.
No, because you're thinking about your life.
Exactly. There you go. Right. You just said it.
Exactly. You're thinking about your life, and at that point, I believe that some police officers stop thinking about other individuals' lives.
You had something, Rod?
Yeah, at some point, if you break it down to, let's just say, a child. Now, you tell kids, don't do this, don't do that, or you try to lead by example. But you know that there's something deep down within you that you know that that's wrong.
Yeah.
There should be like a moral compass, or should be a moral compass in you to say, this is too much. This is excessive. This is outside the bounds of what I'm comfortable with. And so, but you have to understand, and I hope that these officers get it, is that this man died because you followed an order and you followed through, and he's died. He's dead. Yeah. So I don't think, me personally, this is just my own personal bias, I don't think that should hold up in court.
Right.
Well, I followed orders. Well, your orders, if this is true, it ended a man's life.
Right.
Absolutely. What's more important here?
Right.
You keeping your job or a man's life?
Right.
You know, and I mean, a man being literally choked out.
Right. Murder.
You know, murdered. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like you because your supervisor told you to. It doesn't even make any sense.
It doesn't.
Doesn't hold weight.
No, it doesn't hold weight. That's why we protests have begun. Riots, looting,
pro riots.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. I tell you what, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the rioting and stuff, the protesting and the looting when we come back. Let's take a quick commercial, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss that on the next 15. Do you love sporting that bald and bearded look? Looking for apparel to match that clean and fresh look too? Then head over to baldbeardedblessed.com and check out the hottest t-shirts for every occasion. Whether you're lounging at home, working out, or hanging out having fun with friends, nothing expresses who you are like your look. Bald, Bearded, and Blessed has the shirt you're looking for. They have a variety of styles and colors for both men and women in size ranging from small to 4XL. Get your Bald, Bearded, and Blessed apparel today at baldbeardedblessed.com and enter code the next 15 in the promo section of the cart and get 15% off your order just for being a loyal listener. Follow them at Bald Bearded Blessed on both Instagram and Facebook platforms and on Twitter at Bearded Blessed, or email them at baldbeardedblessed@gmail.com. Bald, Bearded, and Blessed is the apparel brand that expresses confidence and boldness for those who love the bald and bearded look in every facet of life.
You have said what happened in Minneapolis to George Floyd and everything that's happening there and around the country is a crucial test of your profession. You've said that. It's a crucial test of our profession in terms of law enforcement. I need to ask you this because some of the latest news is that President Trump, as we know, has had a conference call with governors. And some of that audio has come out and we're using it. And in it, he says to governors, he says, you're weak. He says, many of you should be, not showing this weakness. We're laughing stocks. You need to dominate. You need to dominate. I want to ask you not to, if you don't want to, comment on the President of the United States. But is the right direction for police today in this environment to go out and dominate and to show that they're quote unquote not weak? What should the police be doing now to calm this terrible situation?
Let me just say this to the President of the United States on behalf of the police chiefs in this country. Please, if you don't have something constructive to say, keep your mouth shut, because you're putting men and women in their early 20s at risk. It's not about dominating, it's about winning hearts and minds. And let's be clear, we do not want people to confuse kindness with weakness, but we don't want ignorance to ruin what we've got here in Houston. And speaking for my colleagues across the country, where their officers are being injured, community members are being injured, if you don't have something to say, like Forrest Gump, then don't say it, because that's the basic tenets of leadership, and we need leadership now more than ever.
Welcome back to the Next 15 podcast show. You heard that clip from the chief of police in Houston, Texas. Wow.
Wow,
Yes, sir.
That was as real as it gets. Now, see what he said would have and how he responded to that should have been how those other three officers responded when the man had his knee on George's neck.
Right. Correct.
You see what I'm saying? Because if you don't stand for something, you're gonna fall for anything.
Right.
Yeah, he just basically told our president to shut your mouth. He just told him to shut up. Which I agree.
Yeah. About 50 people have been arrested here in Austin, Texas. About almost 10,000, probably around 10,000 now or more, have been arrested across the country. Let's talk about protesting. Who wants to take it on?
I'm going to leave that up to the ones who have actually went out and protested.
Well, let me, Tiffany, you've been out.
I have.
First, before we do that, how was the atmosphere? What was your experience during the protest?
It was really, really life-changing. And I say that because, I mean, I was really intentional and purposeful on why I wanted to be there. And it was my first time ever being a part of something like that. And I tell you, the unity that I saw and felt, it's kind of defies description almost. It just, the sense of togetherness and people from all nations, cultures. I saw people of all ages, all standing together to fight against injustice and shouting out "No justice, no peace," and calling George's name, and it was unbelievable. It was awesome. Yep.
Wow. How was our law enforcement? What was their attitude, or what was the, I guess, the atmosphere like with them being present?
I'll tell you, I made it at one point all the way up to the gates of the state capitol, and I purposely got all the way up to the gate, and when I got there was a line of state troopers just all in a line, and I would be lying if I told you it wasn't a tad intimidating, because they didn't look like they was, they weren't like purposely, they weren't doing anything or looking aggressive, but then they also didn't look like they were playing either. So but at that point, I mean, hey, I looked them in their face and remembered what I was there for, and got bold. Scream, no justice, no peace.
Wow.
Rod, well, how was it? I mean, did you go out and protest? Were you able to do that, or?
No, I wasn't, but I have family members who did, because of the nature of my job. I'm actually working at a COVID-19 testing site here in Houston.
Okay.
So and at the time of the days and those protests happened, I wasn't able to get out there, but it was a mixture. Some from the lens of some family members and friends who went, some similar experiences as Tiffany. Of course, there was some element of and there's some footage that been shown, some level of aggression, but it wasn't where it was so on a level where the peaceful protesting and all of the things that happened, it accomplished what it needed to accomplish, I believe. I believe, yeah.
I heard a lot of reports here in Austin that there were rioting and looting, damaging various stores, to the degree even our local Walmart stores and Target stores are not even in the downtown area where they were protesting, or have closed early, and boarded up their stores. And so, speaking of that, I mean, what would you guys say? And anybody can answer this question. Can you give a clear understanding what protesting is, or why protesting is necessary?
I think when I think about protesting, I think about calling attention to a problem, an issue, right? That's what protesting is. And I've been a part and listened to conversations with people debating on if protests do they make a difference? They absolutely make a difference. Think about the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement. Many of those changes that were made began and were birthed through protest. So never doubt that protesting is important. The opposite end of that is remaining silent, and that's not acceptable.
I definitely agree with that. I do. When you talk protest, if you go back in history, history says that it works.
Yes.
As you just spoke eloquently in regards to, the civil rights movement and pretty much any movement that really that needs to have an effective change starts with protest. Now, again, those protests sometimes turn into riots. Let's not be foolish. And, as I talked to one of my aunt this week, who's old enough to remember, some of the protests back in the civil rights. And as she began to speak, she said, this is no different, because, a lot of their protests that they say that was just regular protests turned into riots. It didn't always end peacefully. And so she says this is no different. It's just you have more cameras out there now.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead, Rod.
I definitely believe that protests are necessary, because in these cases they give a voice to either the silent or the voice to those who have been murdered. So, and I think in these present days and times, we've seen where there's not any formidable action taken until people mobilize, not only in the country, but across the globe in protests, then we actually see an action being taken. So they are very, very necessary. Now, people can debate whether it actually effects or invokes what we would want a lasting change. That's still debatable, but I think that they're very necessary because of the voice that protest speaks for.
Okay. So, I mean, it's one thing to get out and chant, Black Lives Matter, or I can't breathe. But what next? I mean, what after that? What should we be doing after that? I mean, because you could be out there screaming that to the top, top of your lungs. And the cops are there just there to make sure nothing get out of hand, nothing jump off. But now what do we do after that? Okay, they heard our cries, they heard our our pleas, for justice, all of this, all of this crazy mess going. But now what? That's my thing. For people that are listening, now what?
You burn down City Hall. No, I'm just joking. No, go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry.
I think that there is is necessary that, yes, we do go to the voting booths, because I think that there is something powerful when you do something on your local level with your county and then with your federal judges, right? Because that's where the real judiciary impact happens, right?
Right.
So, but I also believe that there is this blueprint that happened during the civil rights era that I think that is a missing element of the protests and the call for social justice in our present day, and that is mobilization, either simultaneously as you protest or then thereafter, that you understand that racism is also rooted in an economic issue of capitalism.
Yeah.
So I think that we have to turn inward to say, where are we spending our money? Who are our allies? Meaning those who are actually, with their money, are actually asking for change, social change, and change is coming in the form of better policing or better police engagement through training. Why is it that officer has to use deadly force? Like that is the first thing, like deadly force. So, and also too, those who actually support, whether we believe it or not, there are corporations that are backed and supported by the criminal justice system. So there are many, I won't name any, but there are several. And I tell people that you have to understand that when you go to this particular store that's a part of a corporation and you spend your money there, your money then channels to a broader, more deeper system that marginalizes and criminalizes people of color. So there, I think there has to come a time where you divest your money, do your research, divest your money out of these corporations to create policy, but also to create better systems that are for all people. And our current system is not. It's not.
Wow. That's interesting what you said, because I remember, and I think it was the Sioux Indian tribe you were talking about in South Dakota.
Absolutely.
That did that exact same thing,
Right.
And saw change basically.
Right.
Yeah. Oh man, that is so. Wow. There's a lot. Yeah, we got there's a lot of money that we spend.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Why? But why do I always wonder, why does it, when we get in their pockets, you know what I mean? Why does it then the eyebrows go up, or they want to even, it even matters at that point. You know what I'm trying to say?
I mean, money talks at the end of the day, I mean, not to get biblical, but we always say the phrase that, money is the root to all evil.
The love of money.
The love thereof is the root to all evil. But we fail to quote the scripture where the Bible says, we fail to quote the scripture that the Bible also says that that money answereth all things. You know what I mean? And so, you can't operate in this world without it. And so if you take the essential thing away from the person, which is money, they'll get anybody's attention on any level at any given time. You take the money away, they'll start looking.
So true.
Yeah. Wow.
And in addition to that, just think about the whole pattern of when we got into COVID.
Yeah.
Right. And how the stock market, it started crashing and all these things. So, but here we have a stimulus check, right?
Right.
Because what happens with Wall Street, which is the bloodline of the capitalism in this country, what happens is that you say, listen, if people are not out spending, they're not out in the marketplace spending, and to understand that every single corporation or franchise or business is tied into the banking system, and the banking system is then tied into Wall Street. So if people are not spending money, then it's hurting the big corporations. So if you divest like they did in the 60s with Martin Luther King, they mobilized and they said, listen, we're not going to use this public transportation. And I believe it was 380 something days that they carpooled, that black people carpooled, they walked to work, and it almost crippled the public transportation in the South. And they said, you know what? Now we're going to hear you. Now we want you to come to the table. And what is it that you want? And so, but when you hurt the pocket, then the ear will lean into you.
That's a great way to say it.
It.
The ear will lean into you.
Oh, yes.
That's absolutely awesome.
Yeah, I mean, oh man, this is so good, y'all. I got so many questions. Anybody else got questions? What about you guys out there, the listeners? Thank you so much for tuning in to us tonight. Do y'all have any questions? I noticed that Andrea Clark is in the room. She said that the first time ever in Austin. Oh, that was in regards to the protest. I had spoke with her earlier during the week, and she was telling me that Austin was known for peaceful protesting, and this is like the first time ever, that the rioting and the looting and all of that stuff was taking place.
Wow.
And how do y'all feel about that? I mean, I understand, you talked about last week in the Enough Part 1 about not necessarily agreeing with that, but maybe going to the building where decisions were made and setting it ablaze. I mean, but
it sounds fun. I know it sounds funny, but I use that terminology so people can understand that, you have to go to the places where decisions are made. Yes, you're responsible for your community, but when laws are made, they're not made in your community. And so at that point, if you're going to protest downtown where people can see you, where people who make the decisions can see your face.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I think, good point. I think also too, it marks like the intensity of where we are now. Because you can only ask so many times, and then it's like, then you're going to demand. And then if you're demanding, if that's not happening, then it's like, you're going to do what you feel like you need to do to make your voice be heard. And so again, while I don't condone violence, I think people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And sometimes it gets rough,
Wow.
Yeah. I liken it unto the boiling point. So when water boils, right, the temperature
Yeah.
continues to rise.
Yeah.
And eventually, if you don't turn the heat off the water, then it's going to produce steam, because that is another form of the water. Then that steam will also burn you. So, so I use that analogy to say, in this country, in this present time, with these sequence of events, especially if we're able to see a man get his life taken from him in 8 minutes and something seconds, that to me is a boiling point that would eventually tip over. So when we say, now again, I want to qualify by saying I do not agree with looting and rioting, but what I'm saying is that oftentimes we've seen, even in history, that oftentimes that is some of the methods that are the attention getters in order for you to understand that this is at a boiling point and the temperature has now tipped to a place where it's painful, and you got to hear us and you got to see us.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Did you have something? Okay. I guess what? We'll take a commercial break. We'll come back, and when we do, we'll talk about what Black Lives Matter means, what does it represent, what it stands for, and then we'll also talk about how we should be talking to our children, especially our young Black males,
Right.
but also addressing because there are Black women that have been murdered.
Yes.
One being Breonna Taylor,
Correct.
which her birthday is today, I believe, and we'll talk about that when we come back right here on the Next 15. Hey, did you know that you can now listen to the Next 15 podcast show with Trey North on Spreaker, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube? That's right. Catch up on previous episodes on your favorite music platform, and don't forget to subscribe to the all-new website by going to www.next15podcast.com. When you subscribe, you get VIP access to upcoming live events, news about upcoming episodes, and other information before anyone else. Head over to www.next15podcast.com right now and subscribe today.
I don't have no more tears, honestly. I've cried enough. I'm here for one reason, for my brother's honor. He was murdered in broad daylight for the world to see. We, as Black men, we've seen a lot of stuff as far as murders and people being taken from us, right? True. But now, not only it's been seen by us and our brothers, but it's been seen by our children now. So I'm sitting there watching this, and my daughter tells me, Dad, I can't leave you. Because I seen what happened to your friend. And I think you need me. My daughter's 6 years old.
Oh my God.
For my daughter to see that and tell me that I need her at 6, imagine what the pain and the frustration is in my mind right now.
And we're back on the Next 15 podcast show. That was some deep stuff. Steven Jackson, good friend of George Floyd, former NBA player, out of Houston, Texas. Wow. I mean,
wow.
Yeah. Jesus, I don't. That just I've heard that. I of course, you know, I produced the clip, but just hearing it over and over, it just still hits me in my gut. What should we be? How should we be? What should we be telling our our children about Black Lives Matter and about, you know, racial injustice and
I have my children are, you know, at the age, I have a 21-year-old, a 20-year-old. My son just graduated about 2 weeks ago at the age of 18. And then, of course, my baby girl, who's 16, finna be 17. what this has brought up in my household is the conversation, because our children, this particular generation after us, hasn't experienced or really seen anything remotely close to this in their lifetime. Because we grew up in a time where we were right after the civil rights movement, you know what I mean? And then now for our children to see pretty much the same thing that was going on in the 50s and the 60s, and just now, now that, we're living a better, quote unquote, a better life, if you will, but we're still experiencing the same tragedy. And the conversation that happens in my household is that, I tell my kids, this is no different. Nothing has changed. You can call it what you want to call it, but we are still, quote unquote, slave to something. You know what I mean? And that might be the slave mindset on how we live our lives, but to the point of understanding that as much that has changed through the years, a lot hasn't changed.
Right.
Well, that's what we're looking at. That's what we're facing. Because if it had been changed to that degree, we wouldn't be seeing what we're seeing now. So that tells us that while we've made progress, we still have a ways to go. Yeah.
Right. And when I think about it, even in my own lifetime, the two things that stick out to me when I was younger was the Rodney King riot. Rodney King, when he got beat by the police officers.
Yeah.
And then, because I'm from a small East Texas town that's near Jasper, Texas, it's when Mr. Byrd, got dragged and killed by those white men. So, but I would never have imagined, still in my lifetime, that I'm witnessing that as a young adult, and then where we are present day, where we've had 3 African Americans murdered in 3 months of the same year, with no formidable action taken in the court of law. And so for me and my household, I do have those conversations with my son and my daughter. My son is 16. My daughter will be 21 this month. And I really try to temper it where it's not a conversation of doom and gloom, but to tell them, like, this is the world that we live in. There's darkness, there's dark places, there's evil in this world. But the one thing that I want you to understand is that your melanated skin, your blackness is God-given, and you are just as valuable as anything that walks on this earth. And so never ever lose that sight of that in the midst of that evil, in the midst of that darkness that we face. We still are here, and we still have value too. Yeah,
I agree. Let me ask this. Well, first of all, you know what? Let's open up the lines. Let's give the listeners an opportunity to respond or even ask questions. I think it'd be a great opportunity. If you want to call in, the number is 512-827-9164. If you're in the chat room, that number is going to come up and you'll see it. But again, to our listeners that are not in our chat room, the number is 512-827-9164. You have a voice. We want to hear it. We want to hear your comments, your opinions, or your questions, whatever you have. Yeah. So if you want to call in and be a part of the show, 512-827-9164. So my thing is, we hear Black Lives Matter, and then you hear the kickback of those saying, well, all lives matter. Yeah. So, and they do. They do. We understand that. To our counterparts, what would you say, Tiffany? To the statement, well, yeah, I know Black Lives Matters, but so does all lives.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked me that question, Trevor. I actually had an experience earlier this week. I happened to be on social media, and a white artist that I love was observing our Tuesday blackout that we had for social media. And so I went on this gentleman's site. to express my support and appreciation of him supporting the blackout, and I saw like tons of all lives matter. So typically where I would not say anything, I felt so compelled to respond. And so I responded. I let the artists know that I appreciated their support, but then I also responded to those all lives matter that comments that I saw. And the response that I got was just, some of it, I mean, instantly it was just like people coming at me with statistics on black violence. And I'm like, that you missed the whole point. Because when we say Black Lives Matter, we're not saying all lives don't matter. It's just like, I saw an example of like Breast Cancer Awareness Month. If somebody expresses support of that, and they, you don't see people coming back and saying, but yeah, other, this issue matters too. It's like people are okay with someone just expressing support. And I don't understand why, when we say Black Lives Matter, certain people want to take it like we're trying to say all lives don't matter. All lives do matter. We are crying that because we're fighting against the injustice that we see, and trying to demand change and equality for the Black community. So when we say that, we're not saying that all lives don't matter.
And so the crazy part about that is that I've experienced something close to that, where you say, well, Black Lives Matter, and then you have somebody else says, well, all lives matter also. Well, here's the problem. We say the term Black Lives Matter, and I agree with that term, but I think we need to even go further than Black Lives Matter. But I want to promote Black lives are equal. Yeah. Because dogs' lives matter.
That's true. Touche.
Whales' lives matter. Yeah. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But are the lives equal? That's that's where I come at, is because I feel like we are getting to the point where people can use that, well, like they say, because all lives matter, because they're absolutely correct. All lives matter. We have a problem with our lives being equal.
Yeah. I'm looking in the chat room. Jessica Mondesir says that all lives can't matter until Black lives are included.
That's good. Yeah, absolutely.
That sums it up.
That's wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, that's real good. Yeah, that's real good.
One of my answers to that is that I can be pro-Black, I can be pro-me, I can love my skin, I can love the hues of colors of people that look like me. I can be pro-Black, doesn't mean I'm anti everything else.
Right.
It does. If I make a statement that's Black empowerment, you should be okay with that, because I'm not, in doing so, I'm not saying that I hate cops. I'm not saying that I hate LGBTQ. I'm not saying that I hate anybody else. I love my people, and I think we should be unapologetic. I think we should be unapologetic when it comes to that, because my question too is that if all lives matter, when we see these atrocities that happen in front of us, are you speaking as loud about all lives matter as you are against social injustice? Are you calling out this evil, or are you waiting for the next meme or post that I may post that say, where I quote James Baldwin, and then you come back and say, well, that's great, but what about the cops that lost their lives? And the whole compare and contrast, or let me take a step back. When we hear, well, what about the black on black crime murder rate? What about the homicide rate in Chicago? Well, let's be very clear. I looked it up. If you would go and just look up the FBI statistics on homicide, white male on white male homicide, and black male on black male homicide, there's only a variation of about 4 or 5% rate, 4 and 5%. So what that says is that the narrative to say black on black crime, although it is a problem in our community, but there are just as many white males that shoot and kill white males, or there are black males that shoot and kill black males. But we never say, well, what about that? What about that black on black, or what about that white on white crime homicide?
Right.
Because it's the narrative to say, and it's always the victim. Like it's blaming of the victim, and then you chastise the victim for saying, I want to stop being a victim.
Right.
And me merely having to validate my worth and truth to you, you're oppressing me, but you're blaming me at the same time.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
That makes no sense.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was just looking through and I was viewing how Breonna Taylor lost her life.
Yeah.
In her own home.
Yeah.
I mean, you at home.
Yes.
Like you.
Yes.
You already got the guy you was looking for,
Yes.
but you come in somebody's home.
Right.
Man.
Yeah.
So like, think about, like, you bring that up, and see that's the craziness that I don't think that our counterparts take into consideration.
That's where I was. I couldn't just muster up to say that, but because it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
How the way we're dying. I mean, in front of a camera, your knee is on his neck, and everybody's filming it. What?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't care.
Right.
Your hands is leisurely in your pockets.
Well,
Yep.
not only that, I have to question whether I can go for a jog. Like what?
Right.
Yeah. And it's not blacks, it's even Hispanics that have been wrongfully murdered.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Oh man.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
And so that, to me, that raises a question that I want to ask, because we're experiencing this and we're watching this, but as it was just brought up about it coming out of, bringing up conversations in the black home, is it doing the same in our Caucasian counterparts? What is the conversation that's happening in their home in regards to this? Is hatred being taught?
You know what? I think the answer to that would have to be yes, because we know as people, babies and little children, they don't have hate in their hearts. They don't. If you don't know that, you haven't be around a little child, or a young baby. They don't have hate. So that's absolutely taught. One thing that is encouraging to me online, I've had lots of people reach out, and I did have a dear friend reach out and say, you know what, I'm going to educate myself, and I'm going to educate my son, my child. Right. And that means everything, because that's where it starts. Exactly. You have to teach. You have to teach.
Right.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I seen my daughter who's 17 showed me a clip of a young white girl arguing with her parents. She didn't put her parents on the video, but she was just recording the conversation. And she's going she's going back and forth with her parents, and to listen to her parents speak in the manner that they spoke when it pertained to African Americans was mind-boggling.
Wow.
You would have thought that you were talking to somebody in the early 1900s, late 1800s.
Wow. That's crazy.
Because that's how they were like, they want to be in a ghetto. They want, who wants to live in a ghetto?
Ooh.
Who wants to be, selling drugs on a corner? Nobody wants to do that, but they made it seem like that's what we are, that's who we are, that's all we want to do. And it was just, I was like, wow. And so for that young girl to even record that clip and have the gumption to put it on social media, somebody, I heard one person says this girl needs to be the mayor of that city. To me, it just justified something that we already knew. It's being taught in the home.
I think it's being taught in the home, and even indirectly, because I mean, you can display racism just by how you're talking. to one
Yeah.
another, and kids can pick up on that.
yeah.
Even your attitude towards minorities
Right.
or people that are not the same color. The comments that are made that still is being programmed and soaked up like a sponge that will produce over time as they get older. Some form of hatred or racism,
Right.
if you will.
Right.
Yeah. Oh man, this is good. If you want to get in on the conversation, you guys know the number. It's in the chat room. It's 512. Oh Lord, I just forgot my number.
827-9164.
I'm so upset about this stuff. He's gonna put it in the chat room. It's gonna go up. We would love to hear your comments. If you have any, you can call in. We would love to for you to participate in that. 512-827-9164. I think this has been good.
It has.
Yes, it has.
Oh man. If nobody wants to get in, y'all got anything else y'all want to add?
I do. I have a quick question. You mentioned the young lady who was pretty much trying to educate her parents. Do you think it's worth it debating with people that are racist? Is it worth your time and energy?
Wow. I would say yes.
Okay.
Because there are to me, there are people that are just, I hate to use the word ignorant, but there are some people that are ignorant to the fact. If you have somebody who's Caucasian, kind of like us as African Americans, and all you were raised were around Caucasians, you didn't really interact with the black population. You know what I'm saying? If you were in a rural, so you might not know. Now, you might get the gist of the small things, but you just might not know.
Right.
So the conversation has to be had just to spark the idea of that change needs to happen.
Right.
Now the seed has to be sown.
Yeah, I understand. How hard is it though for someone of up in age to change their mental capacity, to want to do something better? A lot of people are stuck in their ways.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this is how it's gonna be. My mama was this way, my daddy was this way. This is how I was raised, and then you have that type of mentality. So I understand there's ignorance, and then there's ignorance. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I love that. That was a great way you put that. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah. You had something, Rod?
Yeah, I want to also add that we have to understand the state that we're in, and I'm speaking specifically to those who are protesting, and those who, that are angry and you want to riot and loot. Also pay attention that we are in a state of emergency, meaning that there's a national declaration for state of emergency, and maybe your state has it as well. And what people have to understand is educate yourself on the law, because in a declaration of a state of emergency, there are certain laws that go from Class B misdemeanors to Class A misdemeanors, and assault is one of them, and arson. So I just tell anybody, educate yourselves on the law. I mean, we could definitely, that's a whole nother topic, but I want to encourage people to understand what these declarations mean. And even in a time like this, it can lead to more people getting arrested, I would think, and we don't need that either.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for that. That is good. I want to thank all of you for participating, coming in studio, Miss Tiffany.
Thank you for having me.
And Rod, of course, man, thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
Looking forward
Yes,
to having a studio session with you on the next podcast. Hey, we want to thank everybody that has listened tonight. We hope that we said something that would resonate in your hearts and that will provoke thought and change. You can find us at www.next15podcast.com or on Spreaker at Next15. We're available on all platforms of podcasting, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Deezer, Podchaser. We're everywhere. Download, share with your friends, tell everybody about Enough Part 1 and Part 2. And let's just create black awareness, because that's what we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
We want to thank you so much for listening to us, and we'll see you on the next 15.